Hey everybody, this is Buck of Chris's, and this is Recruits, Rebels, and Adventurers, how to get on the same page and pitch in to have a better life together. So we're going to do our overhead, our disclaimers and things like that first, even though I don't like doing them. This is an advanced session. This is not your 101 type of session. This is more 201, 301, 303, something like that. It's compatible with, and the flip side of our episode 9 on our podcast. Podcast is Many Minds on the Issue. The episode in question is Welcome to DID, We Are Not Your Enemy. And that one's talking to what I like to call the goody two-shoes of your system, basically making a case for the rebels, the malcontents in your system. This does not constitute therapeutic or therapy advice. This is not a therapy session. This is self-help work. This is a pep talk. This is perhaps a paradigm shift for the rebels in your system. The people who don't agree, maybe the people that sabotage your system, maybe the people that disagree with you. Because of the nature of this session, I'm going to ask you to put this presentation on broadcast. If you are a member of the co-conscious cohort and you normally keep information from the insiders or by design or accident, it is important to find whatever mechanisms you have internally to share this so that they don't have to fight for front in order to get the information. Put it on broadcast. Put it on an internal video screen or closed circuit TV system. Put it on your internal Netflix or whatever cable TV you have. If you have a magical system, a live Patronus projection of what's going on, whatever it is, just make sure that the information can be shared wherever possible. Start making walls transparent, or I don't care if it's 2 cans and a string, whatever it takes to get the information to others so that you don't have to feel out of control or switchy during the presentation. We want you to be comfortable. We don't want you to be fading out and losing time during the presentation. That's not the point of this. Take notes, let them see the notes, whatever it is you need to do in order to share this information with others. And sometimes it just takes several listens. Different rebel factions may need to have a moment to actually listen to this on their own. But if you can share it amongst everybody, put it on network TV or something in your system, do that so that everybody can share in the broadcast. I'm not here right now to pander to niceties and stuff. I can't speak to the people I'm trying to speak to if I'm being dishonest. I think it's worth giving you a warning. This could be triggering. It may be upsetting. I'm going to give at least some try to be polite. I may have moments of not being very polite. So episode 9 is kind of a wake-up call. You're all in this together. And whether you like it or not, you're all in this together. You're all in this life together. You're all in this body together. You're all, wherever it is you are, you're in it together. And that may not be very pleasant for some of you. In fact, it may not be pleasant for all of you. You didn't necessarily choose it. But there was a point somewhere in your life where on some level you watched each other's backs and you took care of each other. So the goal really is to get back to that. And it may not look the way some of you want it to look, but it's going to get the job done. So a little bit about me. I was an internal persecutor for a number of years. Started out when I was a kid and I was defending my twin sister. She would flee or hide behind me when we were getting yelled at and lectured, and sometimes parents just say the damnedest things. They just pull shit out of their ass to try and belittle you and manipulate you and coerce you and get you to do what they want you to do. I became a verbal screen, a filter. I used to have a internal running commentary, constantly debunking what people were saying to us. That was my shtick. It was not like I would come out and say something to the parents, but I would stand there in front of my sister and listen to this bullshit coming at us and have this constant thought chain debunking everything they threw at us. And when the parents were no longer doing that, our parents got a divorce when we were 13. We just had less of it as time went on. Maybe we learned some of the things to do not to get them that pissed off, or I don't know what we did. But anyway, so as I got less lectures, I guess I got bored and I needed a hobby. I started doing this running debunking commentary internally as well. So that's how I became a persecutor. I was just, every time we had thoughts, I was flipping them around. I was bad-mouthing our internal people. I was debunking everything we said. I was questioning everything we did. It was not a very pleasant life. I was stuck in the loop of the PTSD of our parents, the emotional manipulations, the BPD emotional tirades that our maternal unit used to go on, the name calling and stigmatizing that our paternal unit used to do. We ended up having an antagonistic relationship for quite some time. Fast forward to the 2000s, fast forward a couple of decades, and I started becoming more co-conscious, but I was still a child. I was like 4 or 5 years old. And then I started aging up. So I would age up a big bunch at a time. I aged up to about 14. Then I was just, instead of a little kid doing this reflexively, I was an angry teenager doing this reflexively. I wasn't fully co-conscious. I wasn't in my right mind, if you will. And eventually I aged up to 24 and decided, there's really better things to do with my energy than to turn it on the people inside. So here I am now. I'm an activist. I help protect our team from external manipulation, verbal crap. I fight injustice in the external world and the internal world. So I'm always on the side of the little guys. I'm always on the side of minorities, the people who get picked on and stigmatized. I'm right there with the verbal tirade, if you will, or blocking things or debunking things, but doing it in a much more mature and thoughtful, sometimes, manner. I'm not always perfect. Nobody's always perfect. If I start getting too upset and too angry and start thinking about saying things that are going to get us all in trouble, then they usually tap me on the shoulder and say, dude, you need a timeout. And sometimes that's like my wake up call, and I look at what I'm doing and I'm like, yeah, you're right. I do need a timeout. See you guys later. So what's the purpose of this session? I'm going to lay it right out on the table for you because I know the people I'm talking to won't take bullshit. The purpose of this session is to show you how you can take your myriad talents and actually put them to good use within the system. And I'm not saying you have to agree with people. No, that's bullshit. You're there because you don't agree with people, and that's a great thing. We're going to talk about ways to put your talents to use, the ways that you uniquely fit into the picture, the mature and responsible ways that you can use those talents, repurpose what you do instead of focusing it in on yourself and others in the system, except when necessary. I'll call people in our head on bullshit too. I won't just do it with people outside, but I do it nicer now, just a little nicer. Like here's my critique. I'll call people on bullshit in here and people outside in a nice 24-year-old kind of way. There's ways of still being you without having to be mean to the people within your system. You can become a guardian, you can work on projects with people, and so on. And I'll be talking about all the different ways that your exceptional perceptions and talents, your capacity for seeing through bullshit, your anger, your righteousness can be captured and utilized in a more mature way. And this way, maybe, now some of you may still be looping. You may need to figure out how to stop that. You may need to find ways to get into the present and the here and now in order to be able to work with the system and become, I guess, a productive member of a larger group or a side member of a larger group. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a member of the big group. You're not going to be a goody two-shoes. Okay, let's face it. That would be changing your very nature. That's not going to happen. We're not talking about that. We're talking about how you can be an ally, you can be a pain in their ass, but you can still help promote your shared life rather than holding it back. So this is how we look at our system nowadays. A little bit of an overview. And we use this metaphor in our books, in our United Front books as well. So we look at a system, a plural system, as a spaceship. We have the internal world that's kind of like a spaceship, whatever it looks like to you. It could be a house, it can be a world, whatever it is, but it basically behaves as a spaceship. In terms that you're interfacing with this external body, your human meat form in the external world, you have this internal world where everybody lives together and you're floating around in space or moving around in space. And that would be the human external world. We call it human space. So your spaceship internally is exploring human space externally. And the reason we like a spaceship metaphor rather than a house, houses are fixed in place in terms of the metaphor. A house is fixed in place, but really our internal stuff moves around in human space. So it doesn't make any sense to us to use a metaphor of a house. We used to use a metaphor of the house when we did our United Front boot camp, the 30-day blog that has all the self-help stuff. We did that as a house. But over time, we thought about it and said, there's something wrong with this metaphor, and we figured it out. When we share our body, we're also sharing a life support system, very much like a spaceship. So it can't be a sailing ship because then you can just breathe the open air, right? It has to be a spaceship because you cannot just go above deck and walk around in outer space. We look at it as a spaceship because that conveys the importance of your body. It conveys the importance of this shared life support system. If your body dies or gets hurt, everybody dies or gets hurt. It's not a separate entity. I know from dissociation and from having trauma and abuse, sometimes we want to disown our body. The important thing is somewhere in our healing journey to accept our body back and to take good care of it because it's the only life support system we have. So very much like the Enterprise or any other spaceship, you have to take care of that ship. That is your life support system. You and the whole crew are 100% dependent on that spaceship. So we like that metaphor of a spaceship. And then our external human form, which can breathe and live in human space, it has adventure. We all go on adventures using this external body to wander around in space. I also like the idea of the spaceship because there's 4 levels of entities living on that spaceship. You have the officers who are basically in charge. They have the responsibility and they have extra privileges, if you will. They're in charge of most of the major decisions for the ship. You have the crew, the people that do the day-to-day, they do the background work, they take care of things, and they participate in running the ship. They also get extra privileges because they're crew. Then you have the passengers. You have people who everybody knows are there. There's a list. They can do a roll call. They can check in on people. They have quarters. They're comfortable. They're fed. They're taken care of. Part of the crew's responsibility is taking care of the passengers as well as the ship. There's a in-between place where people can participate but have not chosen to become full crew or become officers yet, but they have a little more access and privilege than the stowaways. So the stowaways are the passengers who don't respond to roll calls, who don't show up to meetings, who do not have cabins, don't have access, don't have privileges. Not that anybody on the ship doesn't want them to, but they're busy hiding. They're stuck in the air ducts, they're in the trash compactor, they're in the cargo bay behind the boxes, hiding someplace on the ship. One of the many responsibilities for the passengers, the crew, or the officers is looking out for the stowaways. Occasionally, maybe leaving some food around, making sure that they don't make the cargo bay so cold. Running around trying to make life as comfortable as possible for these poor people who aren't ready to trust the crew and the passengers yet. So that's kind of where we like to think of the whole spaceship paradigm. Some people's, so the goody two-shoes are basically the officers and the crew, right? And a lot of the rebels are the stowaways, maybe some of the passengers. So when we divide everything into the recruits and the rebels, the recruits or the goody two-shoes, the people who get the privileges and basically have control of front, whether we like it or not. When we look at this, I'm not trying to stratify people into castes. That's why I'm always sure to say when we talk about officers, it's responsibility and extra privileges. The responsibility earns those extra privileges. It's not that they're an elite class that just gets to get something. They're taking responsibility for everybody's shared life on some level. So they get extra privileges because of it. It's a payment. So it's important to keep in mind that nobody just gets away with something because. This is another argument that doesn't really fully belong in here, but I will mention it. When a therapist or external people think there's an original or a core or a host, that person, quote unquote, owns the life and everybody else is kind of hanging on, we disagree. We very, very strongly disagree. We think everybody is equal. Everybody is an alter, a part, a person, whatever it is you want to call it. Everybody is equal. Everybody has equal rights in the system. Nobody is like, oh, but you're the first, or you're the original, or you're the better, or you're the person who owns the name of the body is not necessarily any better than anybody else and doesn't have any inherent rights. You're not royalty. You don't have inherent rights, just that you inherit because you got the name. Everybody in your system is equal. Everybody has to pull their weight to get privileges or don't get privileges. Really. I mean, this is how we set it up in Recruits. So if you read United Front Recruits, we talk about setting up a system where there are rules and thus the people, you're working through the process of making all the passengers into either crew or officers as they're ready. In the process of Recruits, you're actually building this system where everybody starts out completely equal and somebody says, that's it, I'm fed up with this system of chaos. So I'm going to start the explicit process of making crew and officers, and then working through making the rules and onboarding people from passengers to crew to officers. So the book goes through this process where you explicitly make people responsible for your life, rather than it just being chaos and anarchy, where people just grab what power they can and privileges they can, and there's no plan. In Recruits, United Front Recruits, we work through that part of the process. Right now, I'm assuming that you have people that probably are running the ship. Then there's the people who aren't, and out of the people that aren't, they're the ones that are malcontents, the ones that are unhappy with this whole situation. They may want to take over, they may want to sabotage things, or they're resistant to the rules and they're breaking the rules, or they're grabbing front and doing things that everybody else has not agreed is okay, and things like that. Hopefully that helps you understand the paradigm we're working from. So basically the rebels are those who are refusing to obey the crew and the officers of the ship, or are working directly against them, attempting to mutiny. So one of the problems of having a ship that's working this way, where you have a rebel faction within the ship and then they have the goody two-shoes or the officers and crew, is that you're expending energy and time flying your ship in circles. This group takes over and they're doing this, and then this other group fights for it or sabotages them and they're doing that. So you end up flying in circles and nobody's getting what they need or want. Your life is going nowhere. Your ship is going nowhere. And maybe that's the goal. So maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want to stall the ship in space. I don't think that's really realistic. I'm not sure if that's a fear reaction, if you will. There's fight, flight, freeze. Getting your ship stuck in space is a freeze reaction. And I don't think that's really what any of the rebels want. I don't think that's what we want. I think that's what happens when we're stuck in a PTSD time loop. We're stuck thinking the world is a much more antagonistic place, or is still an antagonistic place, that we're not safe. We're better off just standing still. That's one possibility. So what I want to do is give you the chance to actually think about this. I want you to think about whether or not that's your goal. Is that what you're really aiming for? Is that what you really want? And I'm fully aware that change can be scary. Are you the type of person to get scared? Is life something that you're afraid of? Do you need to stand still and play dead, basically? Or are you ready to actually have a life? And in which case, it's not just your life. Everybody's life. The whole ship. So you get to look at what's going on, whatever it is that's going on in life, as either a burden that holds you back, or as an opportunity of something that you can actually take advantage of, something that you can do whatever you have to do to get it going in a more beneficial direction, or in a direction that at least amuses you, if not that something that you can enjoy. And who gets to decide how you look at life? The crew and the passengers may love if you had a change of outlook. Let's admit it, right? But it's your outlook. So you get to decide this. You get to decide what you want to see in life. What do you want to do? How do you want to work it? Do you want an enjoyable life in any way? And I got to say, like, as pessimistic and pissy and stuff as I am, I find things in life I can enjoy. One of the things that really pisses me off is that how we're constantly barraged by external people and handed this narrative that DID or being plural is something that we're struggling with, that we're suffering somehow. And we're handed this over and over again. If you're endogenic, if you're just mildly traumagenic and you don't have a DID diagnosis, you probably see this too. People are like insisting to you how hurt you must be and how hard life must be. It's like this narrative continually handed to us by the media. It's handed to us by psychology. It's handed to us by lay people, just from the media and the movies and the things they've seen and heard. It's in the frickin' newspapers. When they say DID, they don't just say this person has DID. They say struggling with, suffering with, sucks. So we're supposedly struggling and suffering with DID. Now you may be at the moment, with your head in chaos and different factions warring and playing tugs of war over power and control in your system. Maybe it is a struggle for you. Maybe you are suffering. But one of the things I got to say as a rebel is it pisses me off when people tell me what to think or do or how I'm going to be. It really pisses me off. If you go on our podcast, one of our earlier episodes, something like number 6 or something, I can't remember. I could look it up, but whatever. One of our episodes is trigger issues, and it's conformity. We don't like conforming. So the more they hand us the struggling and suffering narrative, the more we want to say, screw you, we're enjoying life. As a whole, as the Chris's, as a whole ship's complement, we kind of give the middle finger to that shit. We're like, fuck you, we're making the best of this. And we've kind of been like that, I think, ever since we started coming out to one another and finding each other in 1986. I mean, actually, we had no idea there was a narrative. Nobody handed us the struggling and suffering narrative back in 1986. But when our therapist said, do you want to integrate? And it's like, what the fuck is that? he gives us some bare bones definition. We're just like, hell no. No, what are you kidding? And we like planned from the very get-go to try and work together as best as possible. I wasn't one of the we at the time, but the overall ethics or culture that was built in here was, we're going to make the best of this. We're going to work together. Like, we've always been here together. We used to get along really well when we were kids, and why couldn't we just pick up where we left off and move on, continue to get better at being good to each other? So that's been kind of a culture within the Chris's for a very long time, which as a rebel, I guess, I kept throwing a wrench into the cogs for that, but they were very understanding that I didn't know what I was doing, and they just kind of waited me out, I guess. We decided to change the narrative. Every time they hand us the struggling and suffering narrative, we're just like, screw you, we're going to continue to enjoy our life. You could change that too. If you have some kind of a narrative being handed to you constantly, you could change that. You can be a disagreeable, resistant by saying, screw you, I'm going to enjoy this life. So instead of fighting the other people in our system, I like to fight to own our life. I like to change the pitiful message that tries to make us sound so weak and helpless. We like to grab our power whenever we can, take control of our life, and show them up. Like, screw you guys. And so we're like kind of, instead of screw you to the people inside, we're screw you to the people outside. So rather than saying that we're struggling and suffering with DID, there's a lot of other productive options that we can change that message into. So instead of people saying that we're struggling or suffering with DID or with plurality, we can have many other more productive messages for the world. We can be playing with plurality, adapting to plurality, arguing with plurality, challenged by plurality. We can be succeeding with plurality, exploring with plurality, empowered by plurality. We can become a plural opportunist or become an adventurer. If you have DID, you can replace plural with DID if you really want to, but you can grab your plural or DID bull by the horns, own it, and have a really good time. And what we like is living in defiance of DID or plurality. That's our thing. We like to live in spite of it, in defiance of it. We like to say, screw you, world. We're going to make the best of this. So in many ways, what we're discussing here is the power of rebellion, but choosing what to rebel against. Rather than fighting the people inside, we can actually fight to make more space outside. And we can do many different ways of role reversals within our system. So we have a role in our system, whether we like it or not, whether we chose it or not. So you got your goody two-shoes and you got the rebels. I've given you a label, and you can argue with me if you like. That's fine. But for the moment, since this is a one-sided recording, I'm giving you a label. You're a rebel. Fine. So you can take that rebel and you can fit that role of rebel to be useful. Give you some examples in a moment. So you don't have to be okay with a narrative that you were handed. You may be stuck in this panic and trauma, and this narrative given to you by the panic or the trauma, the panic reaction you have, freeze, fight, flight. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to put up with that panic inside of you anymore. You can actually say, I'm tired of my trauma running my life. So you can choose a new role for yourself and then use it wisely. So basically, instead of being an internal persecutor or an internal prosecutor or an abuser introject or any of the other roles that fall under the rebel, the saboteur and so on, all those roles that fall under the rebel umbrella, if you will, you can choose to be something else. You can take those skills, the same skills you have as whoever you are, you can take those and change it around. There are other things that you can do that are helpful to the system as a whole that will promote your life as a shared group entity and move you forward rather than in circles. You could be a conscientious objector. You can provoke. You can provoke conversation. You can ask the hard questions. You can debate with people. You can ask them for evidence. You can basically play the other side and give other arguments, even if you don't personally believe in them. So in that way, it's a de-advocate. There's a word I don't want to say just in case. So you can be a debater, or you can be an investigator, like a private eye. So you can investigate things, because one of the things that I know as a rebel that I can't stand is lies, is mistruths. Being an investigator or a private eye helps to sniff out the truth. Any good plan needs opposition. Talk about that more in a minute. You can be an emotional shield. You could be in charge of the ship's shields, and you can be at your battle station all the time, like ready to protect everybody. So in that way, being a protector in some way. You can be a critic. Really, there should be nothing your system does that cannot be critiqued in a constructive way. You can create fortifications against verbal assault. You can be a verbal duelist. So when there are external conversations going on that you need to protect yourselves on, you can riposte and parry and block external verbal conversation issues. You can be something of a concern troll. When they're in a meeting, you can be like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? You can kind of be a white hat hacker. So when they come up with a plan, you poke at it. You do penetration testing. There's something called a gadfly, social gadfly or stuff like that. That's the person that continually nags people about something that needs to be changed or fixed. So you can keep pointing out a problem until the crew gets around to actually taking care of it. Don't forget to do the laundry. You know you're supposed to do the laundry. And so on. So you can try to be helpful in kind of an annoying way, if that makes you happy. Another thing that we like to do is have a red team. So when we go off in a brainstorming session, we're coming up with a strategy for something. We sit around the table and we work on a plan. I'm the person who does the scenarios and the projections against it. So even though I may completely agree with the plan, it's really my job to poke holes in it and look for things that might go wrong and to test it as the opposing team. So sometimes I'm not in on the brainstorming session. They come up with something and I'm the person that tests it and things like that. So the gadfly and things like polemists are the people who repeatedly remind society or a particular group about injustices and ethics that might be annoying. They're acting in the interest and the service of truth and justice. They challenge the people in power. They challenge the status quo. And they also challenge popular opinion. These are very valuable roles, by the way. I don't think society would ever be the same without them. One of the amazing things about having an attitude adjustment is that then you can stop being a victim and living stuck in the same old roles. It doesn't change you from being who you are to take on a new job. In fact, you might not be able to take on that job if you weren't who you are. Being disempowered is when we keep replaying those old roles and repeating the same things over and over again. Just because that's our nature or it's not a choice. Being people, we have choices, and we can choose to stop doing that. That disempowerment keeps us unsteady, triggered, and in a panic state. So then we end up leaking throughout the ship and throw everybody off their game. So when we back off from those triggery, instinctual, messy behaviors, then everybody can free up their spoons and their energy to actually operate the ship in a much better way. Once you are no longer trying to steal the wheel and turn the ship around, then the ship stops flying in circles. So I love going to meetings and getting to poke holes in their plans, and I'm not doing it just to be a pain in the ass. Now I'm actually looking out for us and being a pain in the ass. Diversify. Believe it or not, the goody two-shoes in our system now value my input, and I'm often keeping us out of hot water. So if they think somebody's trying to manipulate us, they call me in, and I can be hypercritical of everything that people try to sell us. And this way, it feels good for me and for them because I'm valued instead of marginalized or excluded. And the best part is I'm no longer feared. Sometimes you work in teams. You could be a whole subsystem. You could just be a bunch of people that hang out together. The red team idea is a great way to use your talents as a group, to use that resistance energy, that rebelling energy in a way that helps everyone. So we mentioned the red team, the penetration testing, the white hat hacking your defenses, looking at your boundaries, right? The whole system's boundaries, and looking for weaknesses. So you can do scans of internal and external defenses. You can look at internal and external scenarios to try and poke holes in them. And you can provide alternative solutions and scenarios to the crew and the officers of the vessel in order to help the whole group. Okay, we know where you want to go, and the path you have there looks like it has a lot of flaws to it. So here's another way of getting there. Why don't we go around this way where it's safer? Or why don't we fix our boundary system so that we can go the direct path and it'll be safer because we're just better protected. So working with it, leaning into it, if you will, but doing it in your unique way. You do not have to become a goody two-shoes. You do not have to be a nice guy. You don't have to change who you are at all. You have a lot more value being a pain in the ass than being a yes man. For me, aging up and becoming fully co-conscious ended up becoming a entirely new perspective on how I deal with life and how I deal with my headmates. I did become a crew member and maybe even an officer. We have to have some meetings and decide that kind of thing explicitly, I guess. They've been giving me a lot of time front lately. Whenever somebody ages up or something changes, we tend to all step aside and let them have some extra front time to feel out who they are, to get used to life and learn the skills of living external life and stuff like that. We make room for them, if you will. So that's just another culture issue for the Chris's. That's just how we've always been. So somebody new gets more front time, not if they're acting out. We still keep an eye on that. But if they're now co-conscious, they get extra front time just to get used to living, to see if they're officer material, and let them figure out who they are for a while. So you have a choice here. This is basically my proposition. You can be fighting for front, right? But you have two ways you can fight for front. You can fight for control of front, or you can fight on behalf of front. It's your choice. So I didn't change who I am. I'm still that angry kid, all grown up. I still think people suck. I still hate lies and manipulation, but now I take on jobs as a crew member as I see fit. Jobs that are well suited to my skills and my interests, and I'm a total asshole when it suits the situation, but it works. It's been working for the last year for us. There's times it's good to be an asshole and stand up for something important and speak up and speak out and fight for change and to reject problems and manipulation. But I now can choose how to react when there's incoming bullshit. Do I send the crew and the officers to their battle stations? Do I get in a fighter pod and take them out preemptively? Fly around the ship and do a defensive barricade type of thing? Do I do verbal jujitsu? And do I institute some additional protection methods? Or do I shoot down incoming passive-aggressive missiles that are aimed at the ship? This is my fun metaphor for how I look at life. It's how I look at my talents and in terms of the ship. It's how I actually frame my relationship with the quote unquote goody two shoes in the ship. That's what I'm doing. I'm fighting for them rather than fighting them. So I kind of have fun with it. I was built for this type of stuff. And because I'm helping out, we can move forward in our adventure, in our external life. I've got the bullshit handled, if you will. And if I need backup, there's other protectors in the system who can even have my back. So I'm here talking to you rebels so that I can give you glasses to see the choices. I'm not looking to give you the choice. You can do whatever you want. But you should be aware that these choices exist. You have the right to know that these choices are there. You can take it or leave it. That's not my problem. It's really your problem. You don't know what you don't know, and you may never have thought of this before. You may never have thought, like, wow, I could stop fighting them and work on protecting the system. You know, there's so many other options for what you could do. So you get to choose. Continue what you've been doing or change it up. What do you have that you can contribute? And how will you make it work for you? In many ways, this is kind of having a rebellion amongst the rebels themselves. If you think about it, it's like you're spending all of your time and energy rebelling against the goody two shoes. You're no more going to make the goody two shoes into rebels than the goody two shoes are going to make you guys into goody two shoes. It's just not going to happen. It's not in your nature to be somebody else. You are who you are, right? How do you allow your nature to express itself? That's up to you. You don't have to go by your old habits anymore. You can choose consciously to do something differently than you used to do it. So you get to choose it. And really, that's my big purpose here today, is to hand you your power. And you can take that power and say, yeah, but I like what I'm doing. And you can just keep doing it. And that's fine. No skin off my back. That's between you and your system. You can take a look at this stuff today and go, wow, I have a lot of choices. I never even thought I had choices. I just thought I had to act this way. Now I got choices. And, you know, having a choice is a burden in some ways, and it makes you more responsible for your choices. Not knowing the choices is disempowering. And like my big thing is injustice, right? So there's this injustice in your system that these people have an idea of what they can do with themselves that's more productive, but you don't. And so now I'm handing you a bunch of choices on things that you can do that would be more productive. Things that you can do that you can choose rather than just continue to do out of routine and instinct. So now you have choices. And you have the burden of those choices. And you have the responsibility to pick a choice. That's up to you. You can keep doing what you're doing, or you can change it up. So let's say you decide you want to change things a little bit, maybe dip your toe in the water, start thinking about other things that you could do. So I'm going to start talking about some of the different resources that we've put out. We have a bunch of resources on getting unstuck in your system. We do talk about some of the getting unstuck stuff in Bootstrapping for Healthy Multiplicity during this conference. We also have a lot of bootstrapping and self-help materials on kinhost.org. You can take advantage of our podcast for internal trust issues. So that would be actually very important. In order to onboard or get unstuck, you may want to listen to that. That'll help with the interpersonal relationship issues in your system. That is mostly framed for the goody two-shoes, but it works on both sides. It's about how there's 6 different episodes, so it's pretty complicated. It reframes the relationships. It shows you information about boundaries and how when you have a lot of empathy going on and a lot of leakage, That's actually a sign that the boundaries are broken inside of your system. So these are like all little important components. And then the last 2 episodes out of the 6 are the breaking trust, all the little stupid things that people do that undermine the trust within the system. Compromising trust. That's what it is. Compromising trust. Not compromising as in a good thing, compromising as in undermining trust. And then the building trust episode, which talks about all the things that you do to be more trustworthy and the things you can actively do to help build trust. So that's a good one. If you're still having issues with being stuck in the there and then, there are resources on presence and such on the kinhost.org website. In fact, we'll go and we'll actually make sure that we tag a bunch of articles with presence, Presence. We will tag a bunch of articles with presence so that when you look up the category presence on the website, the grounding articles and other related things to help bring people more into the here and now should come up. So we'll tag all the here and now stuff with it and so on. You can also look up rescue missions on kinhost.org, and that will have some information on helping people get more into the here and now as well. And the third way of increasing your presence in the here and now, if you're willing to get external assistance, is something called the soul retrieval, which is a shamanic technique. There's a lot of explanations on both of our websites. So we have articles on Liberated Life Coaching about soul retrieval and on kinhost.org regarding shamanic techniques. So if you look up shaman or shamanic, you should get a list of some of the resources that mention shamanic techniques. We're going to tag them with presence as well. If you're doing pretty well on being in the here and now and you kind of know what's going on and you're listening to this presentation and it's making sense to you, because those who are stuck in the there and then will probably keep finding and losing the presentation as they go. But if you've been able to hang through this whole presentation talking to your rebels, then the next thing to do, if you're completely unstuck and you're more in the here and now than not, the next thing to do is work on communication and co-consciousness. Now, being co-conscious with these people, with the goody two-shoes, does not mean that you'll be infected with being a nice person. I'm not a nice person. We have a lot of not nice people in here. We just don't usually, they opt not to go out. Like my buddy Almarissa, nobody wants to meet her. If you meet her, it's been a bad day. Okay, I can't say nobody wants to meet her. Fine. Somebody's like, well, what about so-and-so? They really like her. Yeah. So communication and co-consciousness. Building up the ability to collaborate and work together and exercising those muscles. One of the great ways to do that is to start with mapping or journaling. I know everybody says journaling, but do mapping. Mapping may be the first easiest skill to start getting on the same page with the other people. And you can go to the mapping session and complain about things and ask them to move stuff around. That's fine. You don't have to be nice and, stuff, but participate, because you'll have a shared project to work on and a shared goal of somewhat accurate representation of what's going on in your head, right? So that gives you an actual concrete project with a beginning and an end that's manageable, where communication and co-consciousness is a process that happens over time. But you can have these little advancements, little jumps in improvements in communication and co-consciousness. And yeah, journaling, having meetings. You should really work on participating in meetings. You can be the voice of dissent, but be there. If you work on the internal trust issues, that also goes a long way to helping to develop communication and co-consciousness as well. Like once they know you're just a persnickety and you're not like out to hurt people inside the system, that will go a long way towards helping to build trust. So these things are muscles. Co-consciousness, communication, these things are muscles. It's not something you do once you get it right and then you stop. These are things that increment slowly over time, that you have to actually build them up. And it's a use it or lose it. So I think most of us, most systems had co-consciousness and communication on some level when we were younger. Maybe not really good, but we had some at different points, or at least we did. We had a lot of communication when we were younger. It was so natural for us to communicate with each other. We did switch. We switched roles while singing. We would switch roles while playing Monopoly together. Now it's like a running joke, you know. We used to actually get up from one side of the board and sit down on the other side. And both people, however many of us were playing, we were always playing to win. No matter what side of the board we were on, you know, no matter which set of cards and so on, we were always playing to win. It wasn't like one of us was the real person playing and the other one was playing to lose, for that one to lose, you know? No, we actually played with both sides trying to win. If you get really good at the communication and co-consciousness stuff, then it may happen by itself, but you can actually actively work on onboarding, which we were talking about. United Front recruits, we actually have a lot of work on onboarding members of the system in that book. So once you're in the here and now and you're awake to what's going on, you may be ready to start working with the crew on the ship or even becoming one of the crew. And maybe you need to work out trust issues like we just mentioned. And if you're willing to take on the additional responsibility, you might become an officer. You can be the person that works on shields. You can be the person that works in the engine room. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you feel you have the talents for and that they agree is a good position for you and you all work it together, it's like, oh, yeah, you want to work on our defenses? You want to like fix all our boundaries and work on shields? And they should be thrilled and grateful to have better shields and better boundaries and stuff. Find ways that your talents work within the crew. So there's kind of a method to the madness of how we work our system. You can get your feet wet with the United Front Bootcamp blog, which is free and basically complete. Occasionally we add a new article for something that comes up. So there used to be 30 articles. Now there's however many, 36, something like that, 40. The United Front Bootcamp blog, which you can get to on the sidebar at kinhost.org, or actually I think it's on the homepage too. You can go there and you can get little self-help articles with some exercises thrown in, and it'll get you as far as like having meetings and things like that. But basically you start with being fed up. One person says, that's it, I've had it, puts their flag in the ground, if you will, and says, who wants to join me? You know, or two people say, you know, I'm fed up with it. Yeah, me too. And they say, okay, that's it. You know, we're going to start a meeting. And you have a meeting and you see who shows up and you talk to them. Hey, you know, are you fed up with this too? So that's kind of our onboarding methodology, which we also use in United Front Recruits. If you like it from the spaceship point of view, you should go onto LeanPub and get the United Front bundle. There's a link to it at the end of the video. We wrote the blog in 2011, so there's a lot of things we've thought of since then, a lot more advanced stuff. It's all being bundled into a book. It got so large, we split it into 3 books. Talks about passengers and coming up with the rules, meetings, a lot of the skills that go into just running your daily operations inside. The book I'm working on is Rebels. That's the second book in the series. The subtitle is Reforming the Good Guys. So that one's in progress also. Probably about 50% of the book is done, but in the background because I have to actually transform it all to talking to the rebels rather than talking to the goody two-shoes. And as they're rewritten and somewhat polished, we're pushing them to the live version. As we're writing it, you can get it. The third book is Adventurers, and that's very, very new. We just decided to do it recently, and that's going to be daily life issues. So basically the whole crew, the goody two-shoes, the rebels, everybody, and how we go through life. So it's interfacing with external life. So it'll have things like time management, energy management coming out, you know, all that kind of stuff for interfacing with the external world. Basically covers your next steps, you know, from improving yourself as an individual to interfacing with the other people within your system. Hopefully you can get yourself unstuck if you're stuck. If you're not stuck, then you can improve communication and so on, and hopefully come to an agreement with your headmates about things that you can do that are helpful for your system. Once you've built up trust between you and the Goody Two Shoes, then you can start working on becoming a more responsible and privileged member of the whole group. And it's my hope that maybe someday, when y'all are ready, everybody in your system, that you, the rebels of your system, will join us as plural activists and chant and hold banners and demand access and demand equality in the external world. We have a lot more about that in our plural activism and selves advocacy session in this conference. So this has been Buck, and I want to thank you for joining me for this session. This was Recruits, Rebels, and Adventurers. In case you're just joining us, this has been Recruits, Rebels, and Adventurers, How to Get on the Same Page and Pitch In to Have a Better Life Together. We want to thank you for attending. Thank you for your time, and whatever you do, take good care of yourselves.